Is your child's behaviour a mystery? Ever feel like you're walking on eggshells, bracing for the next outburst? This is the story of Max, the human volcano, and his dad, David. Watch to discover how one father learned to understand his son's tantrums, transforming chaos into connection. You'll gain insights into navigating intense emotions and building a stronger, more peaceful bond with your child. The apartment felt like a battlefield after Max's tantrum. Cushions lay scattered and toys were strewn across the floor. David, feeling a familiar mix of fury and helplessness rising inside him. It all began when David handed Max the blue cup instead of the red one. To almost anyone else, this would have been a tiny inconvenience. But to Max, it was an explosion waiting to happen. A 20-minute storm of yelling, crying and flailing limbs left both father and son shaking in its wake. David's heart pounded, not from anger alone, but from exhaustion and frustration. He had tried so hard to be patient, to keep peace, but every tantrum felt like a battle he had to win. David looked at the toys scattered about and thought about the other parents he often saw at the park. He felt a hot spike of shame and failure. What was wrong with him? Was he a bad father? Why couldn't he calm Max down like those other adults did with their kids? His mind was caught in this tug of war, his need for control against Max's complete lack of it. As David began to collect the pillows, he heard the softest sound, a faint sniffle from somewhere nearby. His gaze shifted to the closet door, which was cracked open just enough to reveal the dim shadows inside. Cautiously, he knelt and peeked in. There was Max, curled up in a blanket, eyes red from crying, but quiet now. David's first instinct was to lecture him, maybe explain why tantrums weren't acceptable or how to handle frustration. But his body was too tired, his spirit too worn out. Instead, he simply sank down to the floor outside the closet, the weight of the day pressing down on his shoulders. Warily, "That was a big one, buddy," David said softly, his voice carrying both weariness and a newfound gentleness. There was a little sniffle in reply, and then Max's tiny voice, tremulous but honest, whispered, "I didn't want it to be. It just comes out, like a volcano." David blinked, surprised by the metaphor. A volcano? Yes, that was exactly what it felt like. Lava and fire erupting uncontrollably from somewhere dark inside Max. Suddenly, the fury and frustration inside David began to dissolve, replaced by a wave of empathy he hadn't known he could feel so deeply. He wasn't fighting Max. He was fighting a volcano erupting out of Max. The boy wasn't an enemy to be defeated, but a friend in crisis. In that quiet moment, David understood something vital. His son's tantrums weren't a test of wills or a sign of defiance. They were an expression of something wild and overwhelming inside him that needed care, not punishment. "I get it," David said gently. "It must be scary when the lava comes." No solutions were offered, no instructions or demands, just a calm presence, David, sitting there, a quiet guardian by the closet, waiting for Max to feel ready to come out. Eventually, Max peeked his head out from the blanket, eyes still wary but less stormy. David opened his arms, inviting him into a hug. It was not the end of the tantrums, but it was the start of something new. A shift from being a soldier in a battle to being a guide through an internal fire. David realized that peace wouldn't come from controlling Max's behavior, but from understanding the volcano inside him and learning how to help him navigate through it. And that made all the difference. David did things a little differently. Instead of rushing Max through breakfast, he slowed down, allowing him to choose his own cereal, even if it was sugary and not the healthiest option. When Max insisted on wearing his superhero cape to school, David hesitated for a moment, then smiled and said, "All right, but you have to promise me you'll use your superpowers for good today." At the park, when another child accidentally bumped into Max, David held his breath, waiting for the eruption. But instead of exploding, Max took a deep breath and said, "It's okay. Accidents happen." As David tucked Max into bed, Max looked up at him and said, "Dad, I still feel like a volcano sometimes, but it's not as scary now." David smiled and stroked Max's hair. "I know, buddy, and we'll figure out how to handle the lava together, always." As the weeks passed, David and Max learnt to recognize the early signs of the volcano brewing inside Max. The clenched fists, the rapid breathing, the furrowed brow. They created a calm-down corner in their apartment filled with soft pillows, books, and calming sensory toys. It became a safe space for Max to retreat to when the lava started to bubble. Sometimes Max still erupted, but the eruptions were shorter, less intense, and followed by quicker recoveries. David learned to stay calm, to validate Max's feelings, and to offer gentle guidance without judgment. One day, Max came home from school beaming. "Dad, I helped another kid today. He was feeling like a volcano, so I showed him our calm down corner, and it worked." David hugged Max tightly, his heart swelling with pride. He realized that Max wasn't just learning to manage his own volcano, he was learning to help others manage theirs too. And so, the little apartment transformed from a battlefield to a sanctuary, where a father and son learned to navigate not just their own volcanoes, but the volcanoes of the world together.